All right, some really great stuff from Matt Berry and breaking down the Pac-12, ASU, activating the Valley, and the college football landscape at large. But now, Joe, let's dive into our annual look at the Pac-12. We're going to take a look at the other 11 teams because, of course, we'll bring you our very in-depth and detailed ASU season preview a little bit closer to the season. So we're going to run down all 11 of the other teams, some of the kind of the big picture storylines that are facing each of these competing programs. Then we're going to run down how we think the Pac-12 is going to finish out in terms of order. Remember, then there are no more North and South divisions. Then give our predictions for some of the individual awards and some of the national, playoff situations and such. It's going to be a good old time. So now that there are no divisions, Joe, let's start off in alphabetical order, and of course, that means we got to start talking about the Wildcats, owners of the Territorial Cup temporarily. The trajectory, though, is undoubtedly up in this program. Jed Fish is doing some good things. I mean, obviously, a couple of years ago, they were dreadful, one of the worst Power Five, if not FBS programs in the country. The offense should be really good yet again. Jaden Delora is back. Of course, there's some offseason controversy with the rape case and the settlement they're in. It will be very interesting to see exactly how that is handled at Media Day and Friday. But obviously, a very exciting quarterback, some oftentimes reckless, but ultimately effective. The offensive line, for one, is pretty strong. Jordan Morgan's a absolute NFL prospect at offensive tackle. Dorian Singer, of course, is a huge loss when he went to USC. Obviously, he's not the ASU is not the only in-state program that can know the sting of losing an all-conference player to the Trojans. But Jacob Cowan is back. Tet McMillan, a fantastic freshman season a year ago. Big time, big body target. Obviously, he's back, so he got some weapons there. The question, Joe, I think is the defense any good and good enough to get to a bowl? I mean, they lose Christian Roland Wallace again to USC. Big time secondary concerns. Keon Byers also going to USC. Their defensive lineman, so the lines of question. They did pick up the former 5-star prospect linebacker Justin Lowe from Oregon, but can he live up to the potential? I mean, is it time, but just a change of scenery? He couldn't live up. So you know what you're going to get with the Cats: a good offense, a defense with a lot of question marks. But is it good enough? But I think so far the trend line has been up, but
Yeah,
up to what degree?
yeah. So they got to make some improvements. I mean, they still. I know that there was a lot of hype, and they were kind of the darling of some folks across the conference, or outsiders looking in, but still fell short, right? So it's a matter of Delora being consistent. They still have obviously weapons they can throw to, but he didn't replace Singer, right? You know what I mean? So it's hard to think that they'll be better without him. That just seems like a very basic concept, thing to say. So offensively, they should still be powerful, of course. Need to be consistent, and then defense, yeah, they're going to be obviously relying on transfers, and we'll see what comes out of Flo. I know that there's some excitement there, and he was someone that I thought would have been really interesting to come here. Obviously, he was a massive, massive, big time recruit. Vontez Burfict type of pickup when he went to Oregon, but his college career to date has been a little lacking. And I know they had made some additional pickups on the defensive side as well, but I mean, they need some drastic changes because that defense was really bad. So we'll see how that trend line ticks up, and if they're going to be able to do anything that really results in much better than last year. And I think they're going to be a little hard pressed to do that, but they could be maybe better incrementally in some areas.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I think a program like that, you kind of like Arizona State. You're going to have typically you have a lot of good skill guys, but are they big enough in the trench? Are they tough enough in the trenches to get things done? And I think for the first time in a while, you're going to have a pretty good offensive line for the Cats, but just that defensive line, especially with the Byers defection, that's going to be a little bit difficult for them to overcome. So we'll see. We'll see. Just because there's a lot of questions, the teams in this conference, including at Cal, ASU's first road trip of the year, September 30th. They're going to be going to Berkeley, first time since 2019. Now, the refrain from Cal the last few years, the offense just is terrible. So they're revamping everything yet again. New offensive coordinator for Justin Wilcox up there. It's a familiar name, Jake Spavital. He's a guy who has some Berkeley ties. Most recently was a head coach at Texas State. Where interesting approach of just like ignoring high school recruiting entirely. But of course, he's put together some pretty good offenses in his day as a coordinator. So he's got a new quarterback, Sam Jackson, coming over from TCU, an exciting dual threat. We'll see but he's a guy who's a third stringer for the Horned Frog. So we'll see if he's able to kind of revitalize things. We have Jaden Knott, who was a fantastic addition to their backfield a year ago. Really effective runner. Taj Davis comes over from Washington as a wide receiver. Jeremiah Hunter is back as well. But what's interesting is that typically the Cal recipe, Joe, has like been good or terrible offense, pretty good defense. But last year the defense really wasn't very good at all. The pass rush is almost non-existent. But they do have a pretty good linebacker combo in Jackson Sherman and David Reese there. Secondary's got some questions. One thing I think to really look at it, if you're an ASU fan or even just a local person, Brett Johnson, of course, was a prep star here in the Valley. Just has some terrible injury luck. Missed the last 2 seasons due to injury. I believe one was a car crash or something along those lines. So he's hopefully going to get back. I believe I read somewhere like it's been like 1,100 days since he was in a game. So really hoping to see that if him get back in, because by all accounts he's a really good kid. But some defensive questions, especially up front. Secondary is typically pretty good, but they went really pretty hard in the transfer portal to address those concerns in the secondary. But still a lot of questions about Cal and just Justin Wilcox. It's interesting. A couple of years ago, like the Oregon job was his if he wanted, if he agreed to certain conditions. But still at Cal, still plugging along. But just you wonder if there's another disappointing season, how long that leash is going to be.
Yeah, that's the thing that really stands out to me is what sort of patience is there for him up in Berkeley, because things trended up positively his first few years. In his second and third year, won a combined 15 games in 18 and 19, but only 10 total victories across the last 2 full seasons in the COVID season. So, you're talking about working on a 4th consecutive season of possibly missing bowl eligibility. Cal is just such an interesting program when you think about it, because I think we might think of them as a different program than they are, because when I really first started getting into, watching college football pretty religiously was, in the Aaron Rodgers days and then the Marshawn Lynch days. And when, Tedford had things rolling there and they're a nationally elite team, but that's the departure from the norm historically, as far as Cal is concerned. So yeah, they're, again, they're going to be real hard pressed to get to bowl eligibility, in my opinion. And, I think if that's something that you miss out on, depending on how things go, what path you get there, it's a possibility that Wilcox's job could be on the line. Because, yeah, like you said, I mean, he was a prime candidate for a lot of positions. I think like on at least one occasion, if not 2, he was someone that was in the discussion for ASU or someone that was like on the fan wish list. So it's, funny how these things work out. But yeah, that's a team I'd say, I mean, if you look at things, they've got to have like the most, maybe urgency is the right word, if you look at the ones that might be possibly at the bottom tier of the conference, a lot of them have 1st and 2nd year head coaches, but they're there with a guy that's been there a bit. So as far as like a hot seat candidate, I would say that Wilcox has got to be the easiest in the conference, if you ask me.
Going to a guy that's definitely not on a hot seat, but definitely a hot topic conversation over the last several months. Colorado, let's talk some Coach Prime, Joe. The grand experiment in Boulder is underway. Massive turnover, like at ASU. I think the numbers are pretty similar, but just going about it perhaps in a less public way than Coach Prime has been doing. Yeah, and that was interesting. I saw that you tweeted out that even the Pac-12,
the official press release, one has like the grid of like the coaches and I think the times that they'll be interviewed, the basic information. Had Dion, quote, Coach Prime Sanders. And it's just like, I get it. I get it from like a branding perspective of the conference, because he's everything to them right now. Like I get that. So it didn't like shock me that sort of thing was there, but I'm just like, that was like nails on chalkboard to me. You can call me old fashioned or whatever, but it's just like, I've never seen, like, people have had nicknames, but it's such a, like, I don't know, modern day branding thing that we have to call him Coach Prime. He's Coach Prime. He always hashtags Coach Prime every single tweet he sends. It's like, I don't dislike the dude, but it is, man,
a bit much.
It became a circus very quickly. And, I got a little bit of happiness. I saw, I don't know if it was a Reddit account, just some random college football account. And they tweeted out a week or so ago, or a handful of days ago, it says, fill in the blank. You were already sick of blank in college football. And a lot of people were like, Colorado. I'm like, thank you. I feel seen here. So, yeah, on the field, we'll see what we get. A lot, there are people that are expecting quite a bit. That's going to be a major turnaround. I've said many times, I think it's either going to be a massive success or it's going to be one of the most epic failures. When I say failures, I don't necessarily mean it performance-wise, though that would have to be a component of it, but just how if things don't go well, you could see it just falling apart epically, maybe publicly. You know what I mean? Like
how's he gonna react? Because when they lose 3 in a row, 4 in a row, because that's gonna happen. They're
it
not
could be their first few games. Like their early season schedule is a nightmare.
TCU, Colorado State, Nebraska are like, right?
Yeah, and it's among those. And I think their early conference schedule is difficult too. So, yeah, I mean, this is something where yes, of course, they could start out and upset some teams and really be off to the races. But for them to start something like 1-3 or 0-4 or something around that ballpark is not out of the equation.
Yeah, so they do have a lot of like talented transfers. Obviously, there's been an infusion of talent, and the recruiting has greatly picked up. I do really like the offensive coordinator hire in Sean Lewis, the former Kent State head coach. Huge fan of him. So they're going to be running up-tempo offense. Shador Sanders, Deion's kid, is coming over from Jackson State with him. I believe he was a former 4-star prospect as well. But questions, I mean, making that jump up from the FCS level to the FBS, a Power 5 level, it's going to be really interesting. So they revamped their wide receiver group because obviously guys like Jordan Tyson are fled to ASU. So they got USF's top 2 guys in there. Travis Hunter, of course, the number 1 overall recruits. He's going to be playing both ways. He'll be interesting. The running backs look pretty good, actually. So the offense is shaping up pretty well. Alden McCaskill, the Houston transfer, best name in college football, Cavassier Smoke, coming over from Kentucky, a 4-star freshman, and Dylan Edwards is also a guy that's got some folks really excited up there. But kind of like, with U of A, got a lot of very exciting playmakers, but the trenches and the lines are going to be really key. And I think as much as flash as they have, I don't know they got a whole lot of substance in those trenches as of yet. 3 returners and 6 lower level transfers are brought into to bolster the offensive line. Going over to defense, I mean, as you would expect with a Deion Sanders coach team, attract a lot of good corners. Obviously, Travis Hunter, the number 1 corner in the country in this class, Cormani McLean is coming in as well. But how are they going to be up front? I have big time questions in the linebacker group. So this could be a team where, I mean, there's a lot of the hype on isn't. I don't think is going to match what we see in the outfield product. They're going to be better. It's hard by default. They're going to be better. I just don't know that. I mean, they're not. I don't see them making a run at like 6-7 wins. I mean, 3 are probably. I don't know. I feel good about maybe 3 to 4 after a lot of these. A few weeks in the season to get going a little bit.
I think whatever happens with them, either direction is going to be kind of overhyped. Like you said, if they lose their first 3-4 games or go 1-3, then you might have some talking heads that are really saying this. Oh, this is a failure. Really just taking it a far south direction. Now, then, if they're winning those games, then it's going to be so far the positive direction, I guess, as far as they're concerned. So there's going to be expectations of the fans because they had that 40,000 or whatever the sellout at the spring game, charging tickets, so it's going to be, it's hard to really, put into context or compare it to any, coaching change that we've seen because all the different factors and all the new players and all the different, obviously the coaching staff is incredible. They're head coach caliber coaches that came in. So there are some things on their side, and it's just the hype is something substantial. Yeah. So to your point, they'll certainly be better. They could kind of be a similar team like Arizona was last year, where they were kind of, again, like the darling of the people who may not really care about the Pac-12. I think there are people that I just saw that seemed to kind of dig U of A last year for some reason. Colorado, obviously, it's going to be very divisive. You're going to have people nationally that are going to love it, people nationally that are going to hate it. So they should be improved, but getting to bowl eligibility, that would be a major jump, not just because of what they have to rebuild, but because of the function of the other teams in the conference, where you're going to have, probably 5 preseason top 25 teams, I'd say, in the league. So, you've got some competition. It's going to be, it's tough to win 6-7 games when you're going against teams that could possibly be, you have nearly half the conference that's in competition for high-level bowl games.
Is Deion the head coach in Boulder in 2026?
I guess I have to say no, because I think I've said it'd be 3 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be a short-lived experiment. Either if it doesn't go well, I think he's just going to go do something else. But I think also he's I think he's using this as a potential jumping pad to perhaps an ACC job back at get to Florida State or maybe the NFL.
And I think that he doesn't even have to do that much at Colorado. I mean, but if like Texas A&M says, "Hey, we're just going to give you a limitless amount of money, and you just be our guy, you be our brand, and you do your thing, and we'll have all the money behind it," I think that he could go to Colorado 3 years and go to one bowl game, and I think he'd still be a, I guess pun intended, prime candidate for a lot of other jobs because it will be so alluring just to see what he can do. Okay, Colorado, yes, they've got some story tradition and national championship pedigree from decades ago. But what can we do if we insert that figure into what I'm just saying hypothetically, if you're, because yeah, there are teams in the South that a couple years from now, like people aren't, it's obviously jumping up. People aren't going crazy about Billy Napier. They're like fans over there that are pretty fired up about that. Obviously, Mike Norvell did himself a huge favor last year with how they performed. Miami's, their team, it'd be weird, obviously, for him to go to a team in Florida that's not Florida State, but yeah, I think it won't take a ton for him to still stay on top. He doesn't have to go out and win, 8 to 10 games 3 years in a row and then to be the top candidate for national coaching position. So yeah, to your point, I think it just doesn't pass the smell test of, it's going to stick around for, 6-7 years and, win 5-6 games, some hills and valleys there. It just does not seem like a long play.
If he can get the program that we saw a year ago into a bowl game in 3 years, it's a good job. We'll see. It's going to be entertaining in any regard. All right, next up alphabetically, let's talk some Ducks. How will Bo Nix do without Kenny Dillingham? It's going to be interesting. Obviously, Kenny's resume of rebuilding, revitalizing quarterbacks speaks for itself with Jordan Travis and most recently Bo Nix going from Bo Picks to Heisman contender. Will Stein's coming over from UTSA as the new OC. I really like that offense. I mean, we'll talk about UTSA a little bit later on in the national part because they've been really fun the last several years. So it'll be really interesting now that Will Stein's going to get a lot better weapons to utilize, and he's got a quarterback coming off a monster year. The backfield tandem, Bucky Irving, Noah Whittington, was really effective. Bucky Irving, of course, was one of the better backs in the conference. You have Troy Franklin, who emerged as one of the Pac-12's best receivers a year ago, and they really kind of added a bunch of talent there. You get the Trayshawn Holden coming over from Bama, Gary Bryant Jr., I believe he's a one-time ASU target, coming over from USC, Tez Johnson from Troy. Got a pretty good tight end there. The offensive tackles are always good in Eugene. But what does the defense in year 2 under Dan Lanning look like? Because it wasn't tremendous a year ago, but you saw some strides a little bit. There's a lot of transfers they're bringing in to ideally to revitalize that pass rush, which is pretty bad a year ago. Brendan Dorless is the defensive end that's an all-conference caliber player. Got in the backfield a good amount last year, but are they going to be able to successfully kind of get after and make the opposing quarterback's life pretty miserable? They added some good safeties, Tysheem Johnson from Ole Miss, Evan Williams from Fresno State. But overall, I think it's going to be, how much of a stride forward can this defense make? Connor Soley, former Sun Devil, he's a Duck as well. Jordan Birch, they brought over from South Carolina as well. Some new pieces there, a lot of new faces, but and I think that Dan Lanning's track record is good enough that the defense is going to be good, but can they make that jump from that kind of, a 9-win Oregon Duck team to kind of that perennial conference contender caliber of the Ducks that's kind of ingrained into all of our collective college football consciousnesses, especially when you got some big dogs and I guess pun intended there, and UW and USC to contend with this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough, but I'm really high on them. I think obviously the career rejuvenation of Bo Nix under Kenny Dillingham is something that, he can build on, and you have the pieces around him, and they really did very well in the transfer portal market. And I think that's going to be a big difference maker for them. I see this being maybe like a weirder year for the conference than people think. Maybe I'm just hoping for some chaos and not predictability. So I think that they're ones that, obviously a lot of love is going to be given to USC. I would imagine the media will probably pick them as the conference champion when that comes out. And then, obviously a lot of people are really high on Washington and a bunch of other teams and can't count Utah out, but something about Oregon just kind of stands out to me. I think Nix is prime for, to cap off his college career in a high way. And I just think that they got pieces in the right places when it came to the transfer portal, in addition to their returners that they can really strike.
All right, moving over to Oregon State, who defeated the Ducks in a memorable game a season ago. And the big storyline there, of course, is DJ Uiagalelei going to be is he going to be the quarterback? Is he going to be able to revitalize and get things back on track after his time at Clemson? Ben Branson's not going to give that job just over too easily. So you figure, though, the track record of Jonathan Smith as a kind of a quarterback whisperer and just the great job. I mean, I'm really have been impressed with him over the last several years and getting the Beavers to be one of the more entertaining and one of the best hard-nosed teams in this conference. You know what you're going to get with the Beavs. You're going to get a hard-nosed football team that has a good offensive line. It's going to run the ball really effectively. Damian Martinez was a menace in his first season a year ago, and so I think he's going to be one of the Pac-12's top rushers. Deshaun Fenwick and Jam Griffin are back as well. The good tight ends, even though they lost one to the NFL. Jermaine Terry comes over from Cal. The defense, though, is going to be an interesting question because they were a vicious unit a season ago, but they lose 5 of their top 7 tacklers, including linebacker Omar Spates, who's going to LSU, and that was one of the best defenders in the entire conference. But they do have some very talented pieces as well. It seems like there's certain schools that are very good at certain positions, and Oregon State always seems to have great safeties. And so they have Oladapo as well coming back as well. Even though they lost both corners to the NFL, I think the track record there speaks that they're going to be having some quality additions there. But when you play the kind of offense that they have been known to play, to run the ball effectively, and if you have finally an upgrade at quarterback, because no offense to guys like Ben Branson, but I mean you put a guy with the talent that DJ has, and if he's able to kind of get things back on track and show why he was that 5-star, in addition to kind of the tough line that they have, this could be a team, could be another dark. I guess it's weird to say it's the dark horse when they're coming off a 10-win year, but when you got all the media love for USC and Washington, Oregon, and of course the 2-time defending champ Utah Utes, Oregon State could make some serious like top level noise.
I think we're either at or very, very near the point with Oregon State now, modern day Oregon State, to where it's similar to how it was under Riley, 10, 15, more than 10, but 15 or so years ago, where, they're almost kind of like what Utah has been, where they had some spikes, some ups and some downs, and then they put enough consistency together to where it's like, okay, like this is just a team that even if there's turnover, even if there are questions, you give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think after last year, again, if we're not at that point to where it's like, no matter what, this is going to be a bowl eligible team. I mean, obviously that I think they're well above that as far as this season is concerned, but as far as just the typical year to year expectation, the nature of the team becoming reminiscent of those teams like Jonathan Smith played for, or shortly thereafter when you had Ken Simonson, Steven Jackson, the Rogers brothers, that sort of thing, where you had these, running backs that sometimes didn't even really know who they were before they, started playing ball, but quickly made an impact. Good line play, smart quarterback decisions. So I think that they're set to be nearly, I don't see a major drop off, even if things don't click perfectly. And if they do, then they could surprise just about anybody in the conference, because I still think that, like you said, the most of the people predicting this conference are going to put them, in the top 5, but probably not higher than 5. But they can beat anybody in the top 5. So, this is one that could sneak up on people. I think their floor is still pretty high. Like I said, this is not a team that I think that was a one-hit wonder last year, and they're going to go back down to a 3 or 4 win team or something like that. That would be catastrophic. But staying around that 10-win mark, or maybe even just like the 8 to 9, I think is something that's still very doable. It's just not Jonathan Smith's not a flash in the pan type dude.
All right, let's talk some Trojans. Their final year in the Pac-12 conference, and you know what you're going to get on offense. You're going to get a ton of points. You're going to have Caleb Williams doing absolute magic out there. I mean, his chances of repeating, being the first ones with Archie Griffin, being only just the second guy, I don't know. I'm not counting out what he's able to do, especially when you lose a guy like Jordan Addison, but you replace him with Dorian Singer, another first-team all-conference player. You bring back Taj Washington, Mario Williams, Brendan Rice is back. You add Deuce Robinson, the best recruit in the state of Arizona, going over to play some tight end for him. Austin Jones is back. They really heavy in the portal to address the offensive line, but they're going to score 40 a game. That's a given. Can they not give up 41 a game? Because that defense was extremely feast or famine, one of the best in the units in the country at taking away the ball. But if they're not getting picks or forcing fumbles, people were putting up a lot of points and yards on them. Alex Grinch is back as defensive coordinator. That's maybe a bit of a surprise there, but they went hard in the portal to bring in some playmakers to help on that side of the ball. Mason Cobb is a name familiar because he was formerly of Oklahoma State, one of the better backers in the Big 12 conference. Bear Alexander's coming over, D lineman from Georgia. Anthony Lucas, another former Arizona high school star, former 5-star guy. He's coming over from A&M. Oh, yeah, they still have a pretty good linebacker in Eric Gentry, and rumor has it they also got a good punter.
Yeah, familiar names, huh? Yeah, it's going to be all about basically what does Caleb Williams have in store as his encore performance. And it's not like he wasn't a known commodity going into last year, but he's a very much more known commodity now that he won the Heisman Trophy. And the more maybe I don't know if problematic is the right word, but Lincoln Riley, can you win the big one? I mean, the way that the season absolutely nosedived for them at a time when it was looking like they were really trending toward a college football playoff position, and he ended with those couple losses. I mean, that definitely stings. So I think there certainly will still be right at the forefront of things, but that's going to be pretty much the main thing I'm going to keep an eye on is can you win the big ones? If you get to those elite games down the stretch of the season, the conference championship game, can you get over that hump, or are there things that are going to fall between the cracks? Because it seems like that was a gripe that Oklahoma fans had about him, you know, about being able to really get past that, because they'd even get to the playoff, but not have much of a performance there. So when you have a program that has those level of expectations where it's not just good enough to win 10 games or even 11 games or have the win total doesn't matter. It's, you know, what are you winning? Are you winning conference championships? And then now are you getting into the playoff? So if those boxes aren't checked, I mean, that's something that, again, the fan base has to have very high expectations, and rightfully so, and they can get there, but it's just like a razor thin margin for error of if they fall short of a playoff appearance again in what will undoubtedly be Caleb Williams' last college season before they make the voyage over the Big Ten. Fan base could get. I'm not saying they're going to try to push Lincoln Riley out the door, but it would be interesting if things happen this year as they did last.
All right, so yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. Like, we know they can score, we know they got a lot of speed and athleticism, but can they play in games against like Utah where it's gonna be grind out? Can they recover from getting punched in the mouth in a game? Didn't do too well in those two matchups against Utah a season ago, but we'll see. I mean, they really went hard on the defensive side of the ball. So, if they can keep teams under 40, that they might make a run to that playoff spot. All right, let's talk about Stanford. That is still the most inexplicable loss, I don't know, maybe in recent years, last year for ASU. And not only was that a bad Stanford team, but this might also be kind of a blessing in disguise. Maybe they returned the least production in the Power Five. 34% of their offense, 36% of their defensive production is coming back, which might not be bad. Clean house. Also, no longer there. David Shaw, the longtime coach who had a tremendous run, taking over for Jim Harbaugh, but just things the last few years just really have not been working out too well. Troy Taylor era begins. He, of course, was the Sac State head coach in recent years, and that's a great offensive mind. We saw what Cam Scatterbo was able to do with him last season. Just tremendous offensive mind there. So we'll see now that how it translates here and there in Palo Alto. What is going well is the recruiting, Joe. 8 4-star commits so far, 11th in the country. So that's pretty good for Stanford. So I mean, we'll talk about the struggles about this team on the field, but the future might be pretty good.
Yeah, the future beyond 23 could be solid, and it's just a matter of really getting to that point because for this season, looks pretty bleak. We've seen crazier things as far as first-year head coaches, doing some things and bringing teams out of the cellar, but you just don't really get the sense that that's going to happen. They're a little handicapped because if you're talking about, transfer portal and the ability to really take advantage of that, like a lot of teams in the conference and then the country do, the academic requirements that Stanford has, it's difficult to go after every single collegiate athlete that you can find. So you have to obviously be, kind of picky in what you do there because your options are limited. So yeah, he seems to be a solid fit so far. Again, for future purposes, they're recruiting at a very high level, but that isn't necessarily, to my knowledge, to my belief, going to be reflected in this season.
It's putting together a good offense this year. It's going to be a little challenging. The number one concern is who's going to be the quarterback. Ari Patu is the longtime backup, has a chance to ascend to the throne. That's Tanner McKee left. Ashton Daniels has been around for a little bit. Justin Lamson comes over from Syracuse. They have a 4-star quarterback prospect, Miles Jackson, who was a former 2024 class, reclassified, and he's there now as well. Looks like Patu, based on some of the early reporting, like just because of experience, might get the nod there. He's a mobile guy, got some strong arm, but he's got a good back in E.J. Smith, and that's the son of Emmett. Benny Rostick is one of the best tight ends in the conference as well, but the offensive line, you think of Stanford football, and you just picture a big, burly, huge offensive line full of 6'6", 6'7" dudes. Just they were bad last year, and so that's going to be a big concern. Is no matter who the quarterback is or the weapons out there, if the line continues to be as bad as it was a year ago, this is going to be a pretty bad football team. Defense also was bad. They do have some pretty good players. David Bailey had a good freshman year as well. Gathan Bernadelle from FIU, a linebacker, he's going to be looked at to play a key role. And one interesting fact about him, Joe, he is the first undergraduate transfer in Stanford football history to enroll mid-year. So welcome.
Wow. Yeah. So I feel smart talking about how transfers are, not as much of an option there than they would be for other schools. So they basically kind of have to go the old school route of rebuilding a program year over year through the majority of traditional recruiting. So that's why, again, you're not seeing the kind of stuff that you're seeing with ASU, with Colorado, these first year head coaches where they're bringing in literally dozens of transfers. It's just a different circumstance there. So yeah, so I think future might be bright, and that's a fan base that certainly, what's a nice way to say they don't care? I mean, so even if something, the expectations can't be through the roof this season, but again, it could be better because things were just so dormant there for so long under Shaw. I mean, I was pretty, vocal about it when it came time to it, and it just I mean, I can understand he was a great representative of the university, had a tremendous amount of early success that you can kind of coast off for a while. But I mean, the writing just seemed to be on the wall. It's just was not the same program from even the ones that he coached of the McCaffrey days and that sort of thing. So that to me was several years overdue, and we'll see what the new regime has in store.
The final year of UCLA in the Pac-12 is going to be an interesting one because there's going to be a lot of new faces on that offensive side of the ball. Gone is 12-year veteran Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's finally off to the NFL. Is Dante Moore ready? The former 5-star quarterback, a jewel of this class, I believe a former Oregon commit coming out of Michigan. He flipped to UCLA, and he's got an inside track being the new quarterback for the Bruins and Chip Kelly. Ethan Garber is the former 4-star prospect in his own right. He's back as well, so it'll be interesting to see if they are ready to hand the reins over to the youngster, much as they did a few years ago with DTR. It took DTR some time, but perhaps Moore can get things going a little quicker. Of course, and then Zach Charbonnet has gone as well, the bell cow back over the last couple of years. But interesting, Carson Steele from Ball State, one of the MAC's leading rushers, he's now a Bruin. Is he going to be able to kind of get things going on the ground and keep the Chip Kelly offense humming along at that level? They really went heavy on the portal to help the offensive line situation there. A lot of new faces there. The top 3 pass catchers are gone. Kyle Ford comes over from USC. J. Michael Sturdivant is coming over from Cal as well. But, I think the big question there is, who's going to be the quarterback, and is it Moore? How quickly can he kind of ascend to that level of hype and his skill level? 8 starters are back on the defensive side of the ball, but overall was kind of a up and down, not great year for the Bruin defense as well. They do have a pretty good group of linebackers as well. The pass rush and Latu is coming back. He posted double-digit sacks a season ago. They do have a new defensive coordinator in DeAnton Lynn. He's coming over from the Baltimore Ravens. He's kind of one of those, the trend of younger coaches, Joe. This guy's only 33, so just a shade younger than Kenny Dillingham. So a lot of new faces in Pasadena. We'll see if they can congeal pretty quickly because, as you mentioned, pretty deep conference and coming off the best year under Chip Kelly. The expectations for UCLA and their Pac-12 swan song may be a little high.
Yeah, I'm curious what the expectations will be. I know Chip Kelly certainly, bought himself some time because things were, getting a little dicey there, just wondering if that was going to work. And so, they've had some success. Now, is that kind of like, all right, we know that you can do it, and we know there's going to be some adjustment. So what are they going to think for this year? Because I don't know if they're going to be up to that same level, because it's a different deal when you have a very experienced quarterback as they had, and someone who is just, getting better every year, and especially at the tail end. Like, he was a little bit sluggish in the early going, but you could see it trending up for DTR the last couple of years. So, and then Charbonnet, just one of the better running backs in all of college football last year. That addition of Steele, that's a big deal. I know a lot of people are really high on him. So the quarterback's going to be the X factor. I still think this is they're a team that has earned enough credit to be like a bowl eligible team. Not thinking that they're going to again dip back to that 4-win mark or something like that, where they had for a couple seasons in a row with Kelly. So will they hover around that 500 mark, or will they get enough out of their team to pull a few upsets or legitimize themselves to be in that higher grade of things?
I feel like I should just record the Utah preview that we do every year and just like keep that and just maybe drop in a couple names there, because the brand is the strongest, most consistent in the conference. You know what you're going to get. They're going to have big, tough, nasty lines. They're going to run the ball really well. They're going to play outstanding, aggressive defense, and they're going to have a tight end who does great things, and that's the case here. I think the big question heading in for the 2-time defending conference champions, is Cam Rising going to be ready to go after his ACL injury suffered in the Rose Bowl? By all accounts, he's on track. He's going to be there at Pac-12 Media Day on Friday. That's typically pretty good sign. And so, like, you go last year, Brant Keith, he's one of the best tight ends in the conference. He goes down with an injury. His backup, Dalton Kincaid, comes in. All of a sudden, he's a first-round pick in the NFL draft. But Brant Keithy's back, so the guy that the Utah folks thought was better is now back in the fold and healthy. So, of course, the rising to tight end insert name here connection is going to be pretty good. Jaquindon Jackson is going to be interesting to track. A former quarterback who moved over to running back, had some great performances late in the season. So that'll be interesting there. Some good receivers in Money Parks and Devon Villay as well. But the defense is going to be really good again. Most of the defense is back. You have Junior Tafuna anchoring the things from this defensive tackle spot. Kareem Reed and Lander Barton, great at linebacker. Cole Bishop's one of the absolute best defensive backs in the entire conference. He's going to be there at the safety spot. I think right now, I mean, you could have to look, they host Florida to open the year, then go at Baylor. Then they have a difficult run in conference and taking on probably the 2 best teams, or at least the 2 most highly regarded teams at USC and Washington. Both games are going to be on the road, and they host Oregon. So there's some difficulty on the schedule, but this is a team that proves that they get stronger as the season goes on. The brand is consistent. I'm never counting them out. They're going to be really good and really tough to beat again this year.
Yeah, they just kind of stayed steady last year and kind of snuck into things and made their way back in the Rose Bowl again. And that's the sign of a tenured, cohesive, and accomplished coaching staff where, you don't let the wheels fall off if you lose a game or 2 here or there. And for a team like that is now and was last year expected to do very high-level things, you lose a game or 2, and I think because they lost that opener right at Florida last year, so that's something where other programs could get a little rattled by that, where they just kind of collected things, even through some injuries, as you mentioned, throughout the year. I think this will take some work because some of the other teams are pretty loaded in the conference. Again, we've said that ad nauseum, so this would be maybe one of the more impressive coaching performances by Whittingham, just to return to that level. It's difficult to, win multiple consecutive conference championships. To pull 3 in a row would be something, pretty dang impressive. So, and you got to, again, battle through the entire year. They've got a tough non-conference schedule, and there are some really strong teams elsewhere in the conference. So, like you said, you can't count them out. I personally think they're a little bit on the outside looking in. I'm just saying from like the top, 2. I'm not saying they're on the outside in a deeper position, but yeah, I mean, again, you cannot count them out. You know that the coaching staff and they just seem to do it every year, where they just find these players kind of out of nowhere that may not even be huge contributors in the early part of the year, and then just something happens and then they take off running. We've seen that in games they played against ASU. Sometimes that's been the catalyst for their players. So eager to see if they can stay on that very, very high tier level. But I mean, the minimum expectation for the way this program is rolling is, at least 10 wins, right?
I think they'll have a good chance to get there, because they're going to be really, really good again. All right, let's talk about the Huskies, Joe. Kalen DeBoer came in, and I thought, that he would do good things. I was a big fan of his and what he did at Fresno State. I did not think he would do this good this soon. And yeah, this offense was elite. Michael Penix Jr. stayed healthy. He just threw the ball over the yard. One of the top passing offenses in the entire country. I believe number one, actually, just ahead of Western Kentucky. A couple of 1,000-yard receivers are back in Adunze and McMillan. Jalen Polk's Cam Davis at running back. A lot of some other weapons that have added at the Power 5 level through transfer portal. Now they're going to be their tackles are coming back, but they're going to be replacing the interior of their offensive line, which should be pretty good. But man, this offense is going to be really fun as long as Michael Penix is back there slinging the ball around. A lot of weapons there. Front seven, I think, should be pretty good. Braylon Trice is one of the best, most disruptive defenders in the conference. Perhaps a little bit more on him later. ZTF is back. They were pretty bad against the pass though last year, and so they addressed that. Brought in Jabbar Muhammad from Oklahoma State. So it's interesting. All these great Oklahoma State defenders from their very good defense that ASU faced a year ago, they're gonna have to face again, but just with different teams this year. It'll be interesting. They have a non-conference road game. They're gonna be heading to Michigan State, and then they have USC and Utah in back-to-back weeks. So that'll be interesting to see if they can get through that USC and Utah stretch. I think that's going to tell a lot, because a little minor spoiler alert, I'm really high on Washington this upcoming year. Schedules, though, is going to be tough, but they definitely have the firepower to manage.
And so I don't know why, but I'm just not buying the hype. And I'm thinking it might be one of those deals like a Dennis Erickson 2007. You got a first-year head coach. You've got some talent. Now, obviously, it's not identical circumstances because Washington's bringing back a lot of guys. ASU had a senior heavy team in 2007, but just something like that. I don't know what it is, and it's not that I have anything against them. It's not some logically, deep analytics thing. It's just a gut feeling, and I think it just might be the pecking order, because it might just be that I'm higher on other teams than I am on them, as opposed to being like low on them, if that makes sense. I think they snuck up on some people. Obviously, ASU had their best game of the year last year in Tempe when the Huskies were in town, and they really, gosh, that fan base has to be really mad, because they would have gone the conference championship game, right? If they won that game, yeah. So
they don't have to come to Tempe this year, so their chances are good.
Right there, you go.
Get into the conference title game.
That's a whole different deal. So I mean, I don't think that they're going to fall flat on their face and be a losing team or a 500 team, but again, this is just an absolute gut feeling and nothing more. I think they'll have a challenge in being at the same level, or within a game or so of that this year.
All right, let's round out our team preview. Washington State, Jake Dickard taking over there, and obviously doing some good things. Really going to be interesting. We talked about the Washington passing offense being very potent, number one in the country. Number two, Western Kentucky. And one of their co-OCs, Ben Arbuckle, is now going to be the offensive coordinator, ripe old age of 27 years old. He's got some weapons, though, because Cam Ward's one of the more talented, if not kind of maybe frustrating quarterbacks in the conference, very up and down. He'll be coming back. I found this stat interesting. He's the first returning quarterback for Wazoo since Luke Falk in 2017. So they're not used to having some continuity there, but getting his feet wet, coming over from Incarnate Word. He's a very talented player, one of the very explosive at the FCS level. Had put up some good numbers, but there were some times where you thought that maybe he's pressing a little bit. The Cougs did lose their top 4 wide receivers from a season ago, but they did address the portal. They brought in a trio of transfers as well. Have a couple guys that are coming back as well with some starting experience. The running back should be good. Nakia Watson, Jalen Jenkins are a good duo, kind of a thunder and lightning, as ASU fans probably remember from a season ago. They got most of their offensive lines returning. The new defensive coordinator is coming over from Auburn. This question's there because there were some losses, but they do probably have probably the best edge combination, at least heading into this season, in Ron Stone and Brennan Jackson, guys with all conference honors on their resume as well. They went hard in the transfer portal to help the linebacker spot. Of course, Travion Brown is now a Sun Devil. Henley's gone as well. Ahmed McCullough's coming over from Maryland. Devin Richardson from Texas. They got some good defensive backs, and Sam Lockett is at safety, and Chow Smith Wade, at corner. But overall, I think this is going to be a pretty fun offense to watch. If anybody who's watched Western Kentucky on like the CBS Sports Net games, late at night, that's a fun offense. So I think when you have some of the components there, Cam Ward kind of leading this Western Kentucky infused Arbuckle offense. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and I think you have the pieces in place to on defense to at least get this team to be 6-7 win team.
Yeah, I think hovering around the 500 mark is doable. Defensively is going to be interesting to see, of course, how they cope for the losses that ended up in Tempe here, as far as both coaches and players. So once again, it's all a function of a lot of other things. I just don't see this as a team that's going to go out there and put together a lot of upsets to win 8+ games, something like that, because they'll have to do something like that to get there. So yeah, I think they're aiming for a decent season, very likely going to a bowl game, but it'll take some pretty impressive performances out of the blue for them to really get into like that top 4. I mean, or even the top half of the conference. Realistically, I mean, it's just going to be dog eat dog stuff. And so I think they're one of those teams that's just kind of on the fringe of that, maybe similar, kind of close to like a UCLA, to where they've got a lot of things going for them. They've got some things that they have to address, but most importantly, they have some teams ahead of them that are just really stacked. And so it's going to be difficult to consistently beat those better teams and avoid those tacking up as L's on your record every couple weeks.
All right, so now let's get into some of our predictions for the season ahead. And again, we will go very deep and dive into ASU in our season preview episode here in a couple weeks. Let's start off with the order of finish for the Pac-12, and perhaps saves for Phillips' anticipation. We'll go 12-1. First group of 6 for me. I think Stanford is finishing dead last. I have them at number 12. I have Cal at number 11. Colorado does take some steps forward. Ultimately, not enough. So that I have them finishing 10. Arizona at 9. ASU finishing in the 8th spot, and UCLA rounding out the bottom 6 at number 7.
It almost became a 0 notes situation, except for the last one. So from 12-8, I agree completely. I have Washington State at 7.
Okay, well, I have Washington State as number 6. So yeah, I can see them like very close. I do think kind of that 6 through 9 range is going to be potentially pretty interchangeable. I
think those teams will be separated by like 1-2 games at the most.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be that parity, and those ones that may or may not be bowl eligible.
And then the top 5, I do think that there's kind of a gap right now heading into this year of these top 5 teams and kind of the rest of the conference. I think, as you mentioned, Oregon State can beat anybody in this conference, but I just think kind of right now heading in, I have them slotted at 5. Weird to have the 2-time defending champs a little bit on the outside looking in, but number 4, Oregon 3, Washington, I think will finish 2nd and get a berth in the Pac-12 title game, and USC, I think, will win the top overall seed and face the Huskies in Vegas.
So we're just going regular season finish here.
Regular season.
I don't have any adjustments yet, but that's important for me to know. Okay.
Yeah, so we'll talk. And so you also have USC and Washington in the title game?
So no, but so moving backward a little bit, I have UCLA at 6 because I had Washington State at 7, so those interchangeable. And here's where the hot take comes in. I have Washington 5th,
Ooh.
Oregon State 4th, Utah 3rd, and then Oregon 2nd, USC 1st. If we're talking about the regular season pre-conference title game.
So you have the Trojans, Ducks in Vegas. Who emerges with the conference crown?
In that one, I have Oregon.
Ooh,
because Lincoln Riley can't win the big one. So
I too think that Lincoln Riley cannot win the big one. I think that he will get to Vegas and fall to Washington, who the Huskies will take the conference in year 2 of Kalen DeBoer. All right, let's talk about some individual honors here. Offensive Player of the Year, Joe. Who's your pick?
So, I mean, obviously the easy prediction would be Caleb Williams. I think that between what I expect to happen, and I think when you've got a guy, whether it's conference Player of the Year is a little bit easier, but I mean the Heisman, it's just this massive magnifying glass to where it's like you almost have to outdo yourself. Like if you stumble in any way or if your numbers are similar, then it might be another guy. That's why we haven't seen a repeat Heisman Trophy winner in 50 years. Conference level, a little bit different, but keeping in the trend line of what I'm predicting of, Oregon being in a top spot and trending toward the conference title, I'm going to say Bo Nix goes out on top and is the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year.
That would be a nice little kind of full circle story for him, as one of the elite recruits to bust to Heisman contender and potentially Player of the Year. I have Caleb Williams. I just too many times was he just like otherworldly, I think his weapons there. I think he might actually get some help from the defense, and I think that might help him as with the perhaps team being a little bit better. I think he's going to be brilliant. He should be the Carolina Panthers starting quarterback right now. But yeah, so Caleb Williams will be my pick. Probably Michael Penix. In that. I mean, this is obviously. I mean, this we talked about so many good quarterbacks. This is the best quarterback conference in the country. So yeah, so I think it's hard. I mean, you could put any one of these guys kind of in that top group and have that and like your chances.
Yeah, I mean, Caleb it obviously would not shock me whatsoever, but for some of these picks, and especially as we get to the national level, I'm just going to get kind of weird with it. Yeah, like it just seems like, again, sometimes voters just want you to outdo yourself. So even if you're winning the same amount of games, even if you're angling toward conference championship game appearance, even if you're angling toward a playoff appearance, it might be something where it's put under a different, heavier microscope. Whether that's fair or not, it's probably not. Just why it seems like it's kind of a rarity that these guys go back to back, even if they don't have like a major bust of a season.
Defensive player of the year, I have Washington's Braylon Trice. He's been a disruptive player so far. I think he takes a step up, and I think in order for Washington to get to where I think they're going to be, the defense has got to take a couple steps forward, and I think they're going to do that, and a big part of the reason why is Braylon Trice is going to be like a 12, 13 sack type guy.
Yeah, double-digit sacks last year. That's a name that I went with as well. I mean, you look through it, and that sort of high-level defensive personnel for the Pac-12 is going to be really interesting this year because you had a lot of major departures, as typically is the case when guys perform at a high level. Just so many transfers, and it's just it's difficult to truly evaluate some that we just haven't seen how they play with their new teams. Obviously, there are some top-tier names like a Caleb Williams or Jordan Addison last year where it's like, okay, who they are because they played and did major things. So it certainly wouldn't surprise me if there's some name who's a first year transfer that does something huge, but Trice is someone that could again hit double digit sacks playing for a good defense. So that's someone that at least based on his reputation deserves a little love.
All right, offensive freshman of the year. I think I got to throw it Dante Moore's way. I think he wins the job. I think he's a very talented player. He's going to have some interesting weapons for UCLA. I think he'll put up some numbers and then kind of run away with the award.
Yeah, I think so too, because I think them, even though I'm picking them right in the middle of the conference, still expect them to be, at a minimum like a 6-7 win team. He's someone who was one of, if not the top quarterback recruit in the country, especially, and I think he was the top overall recruit that signed with any Pac-12 school. So when you have those guys with that sort of recruiting pedigree, they're already on the radar to an extent. And then when you're the starting quarterback for Chip Kelly, you're going to have people that are going to want to vote for it. You know what I mean? Like he's not going to necessarily have to. I'm not saying he's not going to have to earn it, but sometimes when some of the more obscure players come in, it's not until maybe midway 8 games in the season, like, oh, wow, well, this running back has 1,000 yards. I don't even know who he is. Okay, maybe I should start paying attention to him. He'll be on everybody's radar from day one, obviously, if he's the starter. So that could go for him, could go against him, but in a circumstance like this, I think he'll be in a position to succeed enough to win that as well.
Defensive freshman of the year, I'm going to be hard pressed to go against Cormani McClain. He comes in as one of the top, or as the top cornerback recruit in this past class. You're learning from Deion Sanders. You're going to have a need on that defense as well. Probably going to be playing opposite Travis Hunter. So I think he's got an opportunity to make a name for himself pretty quick. And I think being in that Colorado Deion adjacent hype machine bubble, it's going to help.
There you go. And those are the things that play in his favor, and I'm picking him as well. Again, massively talented player. I believe the top rated defensive player to sign with any Pac-12 team this past class, on the radar as well in multiple ways. Number one, because of what he is and the recruit that he was, but also Deion Sanders. So to have those things, again, like we're talking about with Moore, this is someone that people are going to be keeping an eye on from day one. If he's playing opposite Travis Hunter, he's probably going to have some teams throwing his way. So he could have some big, interception numbers and get flashy plays and do that sort of thing that people are going to be looking for when they make these sort of selections. I don't know, right or wrong, I feel like it helps some of these freshmen of the year, again, if they're a known commodity, if they're that 5-star recruit who's playing for a team that also has some hype about them. It's not always the case, but then it is. Like, ASU had Vontez Burfict. He was that guy at that time, right? So I think it helps these guys because some of these other ones, they have to go through the majority of the season to really prove themselves. So yeah, those two picks to me, at least in the preseason, sound pretty logical.
Coach of the year, I'm going as with the conference champs, Washington. Congrats, Kalen DeBoer.
I'm just going to do this for the heck of it. I've been debating of who I want to pick, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound contradictory, and it's going to be for the stupidest reason possible because we already gave our breakdown. I'm going to say Deion Sanders because after he gets like the first down as Colorado's head coach, you're going to have media that are going to anoint him, the next elite head coach. So I feel like I'm just going to say that almost in jest, but I kind of want to put it on the record just to see how weird it can be because it could be a deal where if they win, well, I don't even know what they finished last year, 2-3 wins, something like that.
They won a game, right?
Oh,
They
yeah,
beat Cal,
okay,
right?
there you go. Maybe I gave them too much credit. Yeah. So if they win 3 or 4 games, and if they still fall well short of bowl eligibility, but it's like, hey, the program improved this many wins,
Quadrupled your win total.
Coach of the year. I feel like we probably have talked about it this way. It's an interesting concept because you almost get punished for being a good team. So now obviously there are a lot of cases. Last year was a picture perfect example where you had a couple of teams that just really excelled beyond expectations. So that was easy. But it's not always the head coach of the championship team. Sometimes it is deservedly so. Sometimes it is kind of like as a default where it's like, all right, there's nobody that's really overachieving, so let's reward him. And that's not necessarily a wrong thing to do. So naturally, I would probably say someone like Lanning in this circumstance, but I'm just going to go and be weird and say, even though I expect Colorado probably to win somewhere in the ballpark of no more than 4 games, I'm going to pick him just because that will be proof that just the hype of what people want him to be is very real.
All right. So before we outline our 4 playoff teams and national champion pick, we're going to give some love to the G5, who is going to be the New Year's 6 rep. For me, it's interesting because like a bunch of the good ones, UCF, Cincinnati, maybe not BYU, but they're not officially Power 5 teams, so you can't pick them. Tulane run it back. We saw what they were able to do a season ago, but I'm going UTSA. I'm going a little under the radar. 16 starters back. Frank Harris, the quarterback there, has been there for, it feels like one of those 7-year type guys. He is a hell of a lot of fun to watch. We mentioned, of course, their offensive coordinator, Will Stein, is now at Oregon. But I still think that's going to be a very fun offense. That's been great to see the Roadrunners kind of ascend their program in recent years. Of course, ASU went there in 2016. Nikhil had that great one-handed arm falling out of the end zone touchdown catch or whatever, doing Nikhil things. But they're a really fun team now, and I think they have a chance to win the American and make a run at the New Year's 6.
I'm going to go with the same one. The options that really seem, if you're going logic and not real long shot of this, team that maybe not have been spectacular and top 25 team last year is really going to make a leap, but those things do happen quite a bit. Can Tulane repeat? It's a difficult thing to do. So UTSA, they had a real good season last year. I think they tapered off a little bit at the end, right? Because they're for a good chunk of the season, they were really trending toward being that Tulane as far as, the one that was getting that New Year's 6 invitation. So I think that would be the next step for them.
Yeah. Meep. All right. Who is going to make the final 14 playoff, Joe? And then who ultimately takes the Crystal Football?
So this is where I'm just going real weird because it's kind of like I feel like I make the same teams every year, and I just kind of want to throw something stupid out there, to be honest with you. And then there are obviously some elite teams. You look at all like the major quarterbacks that are gone. So that's obviously a lot of these teams are equipped to replace them because it's been the same teams over and over and over again. But then you also have a team kind of like Clemson who's like falling off a little bit. So there can be some drop off. So I don't even know if this is possible, but this is what I'm going to predict.
All right.
So the college playoff, the 1 versus 4 game is going to be Michigan versus Ohio State, and the 2 and 3 is going to be Georgia versus Alabama. I don't know.
Discourse will be had.
So just for all the weirdness to have, obviously a heated rivalry game. Obviously, so it'll be a circumstance of a team with 1 loss and other chaos going on. Oh, because even though I have Oregon win the Pac-12, it's the Pac-12, so they'll have lost 2 games at some point in the season or something like that took them out of the running. The Pac-12 is just going to eat itself up. And then, so I guess I'll say Alabama over Michigan. And I say that shrugging my arms because why not?
Yeah. At this point, it's almost chalk at this point with the 14 playoff. 12 team, I'm looking forward to that, getting some new blood in there, at least some variety in the early rounds. Anyway, I agree with 2 of your picks. Georgia and Michigan are going to make it. Then I think there's going to be some interesting internal reflection time for ASU fans because there are going to be some familiar faces in there. Mike Norvell is going to be taking the Florida State Seminoles into the playoff to get pummeled in the first round. And also, I think LSU, Jaden Daniels, going to take the Tigers to the playoff. I think Washington is probably finishing on the outside, like 5 or 6, just on the outside of getting the Pac-12 into the playoff. I don't know. Georgia probably winning it again. I don't know. It's so boring at this point.
That's why I struggle because it's like, they probably can and will do it, but I feel weird not predicting something that's be the third time again. That's kind of why I veer away from Utah, just thinking that, all right, it's difficult to do these high level things 3 times in a row.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, it's always college football is the most unpredictable sport, but ultimately it's the most predictable in some ways. So we'll see how it all pans out. Shoot us your predictions. That's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our guest, Matt Berry, for joining the show and giving his expertise and insight into everything. Make sure you stay with us on the social media side. We had the big announcement last week with the live show. One more to come. Still some details ironing out there, but it's going to be well worth the time, especially with this season of excitement coming up here. Lots to talk about. Going to be all off season long. Follow us on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Threads and Instagram at Speak of the Devils. Although I think Threads is kind of a ghost town now. It had its week.
I just got one to have it, and yeah, it had a good couple days, but I don't know about that one.
Yeah, but we're there, and mainly Twitter and Instagram. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/SOTD Podcast, and follow me on everything at bdenny29.
And you can, of course, follow me at Joe Healy 42. And a huge thank you, as always, to our incredible sponsors, starting with DeFalco's Deli at 2334 North Scottsdale Road and DeFalco'sDeli.com. Go ahead and get yourself a meal of food there. Get on down to Cactus Sports on Mill Avenue or shop online at cactussports.com. You got to get geared up for the new year, and you can't be wearing the old duds. So you got to be rocking the new Dillingham era type of Sun Devil paraphernalia. DevilsDigest.com. Hode and all the rest. Love the work that's going on there. And that's obviously not that there's ever slow times for that, but that's going to ramp up tremendously as fall camp gets started. So if you are not a subscriber at Devil's Digest, do it now. Get one going, and you'll get a plethora of content for the foreseeable future and in perpetuity, because it just never slows down when it comes to all of that. And then, of course, our wonderful friends at Jones Auto Group. Check them out if you are in the market for a new ride, or if it's something that you even just want to consider. We can get you in contact with our guy, Parker Jones, the owner there. You've seen that they're doing a lot of good things in the Sun Devil community, getting involved with the NIL game, something pretty fierce. They've been doing that for a few years. Pretty much they've been the ones doing it since that has been a thing. So that's something that you should give your support to them. Like I said, I've referred a few friends to Jones Auto Group, and they've had wonderful experiences. So be sure to check them out when you're in the market for a new vehicle. Spaghetti Shack are wonderful friends out there. So you can get the Tempe locations going so that you can get a bucket of spaghetti. The tacos I still need to do. Been raving about them, right?
Taco Tuesday.
My goodness, a lot of options, meat and carbs. Go ahead and sign me up. Again, it's not just ASU owned and operated. It's owned and operated by a former Sparky, the Sun Devil. So check them out online at thespaghettishack.com. Follow them on social media so you can support them. And then, of course, our wonderful friends at Sun Devil Family Charities. We encourage you to check them out online at sundevilfamily.org. They are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is in place to help Sun Devils, help members of this community who face financial hardships due to medical conditions. So if you support them, you're supporting that. Obviously, that's a great cause, and we encourage you to get involved with them.
Once you're done supporting our amazing list of sponsors, make sure to drop us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Joe and I will be back next week with our in-depth fall camp preview.